Hi and welcome. This is an astrological weather report for tomorrow, which is Sunday, the 12th of January. The reason I'm doing it tomorrow, as you probably heard on the grapevine, that there's a big astrological aspect that it has its first exact hit tomorrow, and that is of Saturn conjunct Pluto, which, depending which way you look at it, is gonna definitely be some interesting times, herald in some interesting times. So what I'm going to attempt to do today is trying to tease out a little bit of the meaning. The reason I keep looking up is because I'm looking at the chart for tomorrow. So basically what I'm going to do is try and read that with a kind of focus on what it might mean for general energies of the time, challenges, transformation, changes. Um, so Saturn and Pluto are two big players in the astrological field. They're two of the giants, if you like. Their impact can be very profound, intense, when impacting astrologically people's personal charts, and then obviously the general chart of what's happening in the collective at the moment, which I'm really going to be focusing on a bit more. So the last time, just to give you some kind of context, the last time these two planets conjunct, which basically means they're in the same place in the sky, the same constellation, the same exact degree. The last time this happened was 1982, and around that time we had a kind of, in many ways, the birth of neoliberalism. We had Thatcher politics in the UK, we had Reagan politics in the US. We had a cranking up of tensions in the Cold War with the missiles aiming at each other between the Soviets and the US, and no one seeming to want to back down. The thing with Saturn Pluto is that whenever these two planets get an aspect in the sky, through the 20th century, nearly every major war, First World War, Second World War, Korean, Vietnam, etc., had some kind of aspect between them beforehand or during. So they do tend to create a kind of quite extreme raising up of tensions. The reason this happens is because Saturn is all about control and stability and the status quo. It's the Saturn builds on the earthly plane to last, basically, and Pluto is the opposite of that. Pluto is about destruction and transformation and deep and death and rebirth. So on one hand you've got Saturn, which is trying to hold on desperately and build something that will apparently last forever, as nothing ever does, but Saturn doesn't stop Saturn trying. And then you've got this tension of Pluto coming in and trying to transform that completely and tear it down. So you've got these two major kind of oppositional energies in conflict with each other, and basically that builds up a lot of tension. So people born with Saturn Pluto difficult aspects in their chart tend to carry this inner tension quite a lot. And so if you have got that in your chart, you also probably have a deep mistrust of authority, because Saturn represents authority, and like I say, the status quo, the establishment, etc. And whereas Pluto has this kind of, adds a darker edge to that. So whenever they also in aspect in the sky, any authoritarian figures or any people that kind of embody this authoritarian mindset, Pluto is at, because they're feeling threatened and challenged by the energy of Pluto, which is attempting to transform and change and break down. It actually impels the authoritarian impulse to hold on even more and to really, and that's why you tend to get these conflicts. And it also, Pluto, whenever it aspects a planet in astrology, it tends to empower that planet. as Pluto also ultimately is about this primal power. So, on some level, what you often see when you got Saturn and Pluto in the sky together collectively is a seemingly empowerment of that authoritarian impulse, or that authoritarian whoever embodies that, so that it can seemingly feel like they're full of power and they're able to act in whatever way they kind of want to, really, and really kind of ratchet up that authoritarian impulse. Of course, it doesn't ultimately work because Pluto is trying to transform and take apart that. But that doesn't mean to say people don't kind of cling on and really give it a good go. So it's kind of building a theme that is obviously not so conducive to kind of peaceful and loving times, which we'd all kind of probably want. But there is other sides to it, which I'll build up into in a minute. So this was the last time was 82. And you had that great and terrible music, so it's not the best for creativity. And then previous to that was 1947, which of course you had the post-war period, and you had Britain pretty much on its knees, most of Europe on its knees, financially ruined, and at the same time you had the beginning of the Cold War, so this great conflict that then had the next stage in the mid 80s again. So the Saturn Pluto did really follow that Cold War conflict quite a lot. At the same time, in 1948, you had the birth of Israel as a state in the Middle East, which has obviously created the way it was done has created quite a lot of ongoing problems in the Middle East, and you had the falling apart of the empire. So this was the British Empire particularly was very Saturnian, very kind of, we will bring you order and civilization, we will build railways, we will build infrastructure in your countries, and you will obey our kind of authoritarian impulse. So Pluto saw the end of that. Pluto's Saturn in 1947. That was really the end of the British Empire, which had lasted in a big way from the expansions of the mid 19th century. So powerful change and transformations. You also, in the UK, you had the kind of rise of the socialist Labour government, which brought in the NHS and the welfare system, and basically provided a safety net. So that's, in a way, that was a positive side of the transformation of Pluto Saturn. So Saturn being the authority of the government, suddenly you had this Pluto transforming that to become much more what it should be, really looking after others and looking after those who needed it. So these are the last two cycles, if you like. And we're at the end of another one and the beginning of a new one from tomorrow, although obviously they've been in aspect now, Pluto Saturn, for quite a few months, and they're closing in on this first hit, which is tomorrow. Now the interesting thing about that is that it also includes another planet, which is Mercury, because Saturn is at 22 degrees Capricorn, Pluto obviously 22 degrees Capricorn, and also Mercury at the same time. So this adds another flavour, and the Sun is just behind at 21 degrees. So on a personal level, if you've got any planets on around 22 degrees of any of the cardinal signs, so that's Aries, Cancer, Libra or Capricorn, this is obviously, particularly if they're personal planets, any planet from, say, the Sun up into Jupiter or Saturn, if you've got any planets there, then this is personal. It's going to hit your planet either a conjunction, a square, or an opposition. So it's going to be a challenge. It's going to challenge that specific area of your chart, which that planet will represent. If your Sun is there, so if you're born around this time, sort of the obviously if you're born on 12th of January, that's quite significant. That's quite hugely significant, because you'll have Pluto and Saturn conjunct in your sun. So that's, and but I don't want to go too much into the personal, because you'd have to look at each personal chart and how that's going to affect, like I say, and how that planet is actually getting on in the chart. Is it well aspected by other stuff? Is it a challenging aspect anyway? So what we've had, Pluto went into Capricorn, I think around 2007. It basically went in when the just literally a few months before the financial crash. So Capricorn represents the establishment, and it represents so it represents government. Saturn is Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, so again it has that kind of authoritarian or authority aspect to it. So it represents this, what we might call the establishment. Banks, our financial system, obviously is a huge part of that establishment. And as soon as Pluto went in there, even though people would kind of talked about maybe a financial crash for so long, or said it would never happen, almost the moment Pluto went in there, which is the planet of death, destruction, rebirth, we had the financial crash, which has kind of changed and transformed our society in huge ways, and we're still kind of seeing the kind of playing out of that in across Europe, across Western Europe, across the States, and across the rest of the world. There is this legacy that has happened from that breaking down our whole society, and belief system of how to run a society really is based on economics. It's based on this kind of capitalist idea, and particularly, like I say, the neoliberal idea of free market economics, the market running everything, basically, the withdrawing of the state, which began around the last conjunction, and that whole cycle has been really that kind of neoliberal cycle, I believe, which reached its kind of height around the late 80s and early 90s, where communism ended, and Western intellectuals, historians claimed the end of history, that capitalism was the last stage, and would last forever, basically. That was their kind of hubris and belief at the time. Obviously it's not kind of worked out that way, and in many ways the ideas of where capitalism is taking us, and especially this kind of expansive, ever expanding globalization, etc., is being challenged very much, particularly through something that is even beyond politics, and some level is the environmental concerns that everyone is having. And Capricorn being the cardinal sign of the Earth's, the cardinal signs are the like I said, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, and they represent the four elements. They come at either the equinoxes or the solstice, so they're really the four initiatory points in the year. So therefore the signs that are those signs are the initiators. They start things. They and often seen as the leader of that element, if you like. So Capricorn is the initiator and the leader of the earth element. So as Pluto has gone through that and transforming not only society on this kind of very obvious societal level, but also our understanding of the environment, and how precarious that is, and because Pluto represents death ultimately, and so it's becoming much more, as Pluto slowly travelled through this, much more acutely aware of how we are facing this environmental catastrophe, which is represented by this Pluto in Capricorn. It's taken quite a while, but because Pluto moves slowly, and these themes take a while to come out, and it's only, interestingly, really since Saturn has entered Capricorn, that some of these themes are becoming much more we're becoming more aware of them, if you like, because Pluto's always moving beneath the surface. Pluto was lord of the underworld. He only ever, as Hades in Greek myth, he only ever came out above the into this middle world very rarely, and when he did, he wore an invisible helmet. So Pluto tends to work in very subterranean, hidden ways, deep, unconscious, hidden ways. But Saturn is bringing that awareness out into the open. So we have this kind of this feeling of endings, or are we too late? Basically, have we kind of woken up, or even began to start taking this stuff seriously? Saturn is all about taking stuff seriously, but is it too late? So these themes and that is obviously making us look at society in a completely different way, questioning the way that we've set up society, questioning ourselves as individuals, if you like. Pluto, the other way we could look at Pluto in astrology is representing what psychologists, or particularly Jung, called the shadow. So it's everything that's hidden, everything that is taboo, everything that is repressed and hidden and by society, but then has its and individuals, but has its power because it is taboo, because it is hidden, because it is repressed. So, and if you remember Capricorn being the kind of establishment, if you like, since Pluto's gone there, we've had this kind of really coming up of secrets, these darker sides that have always been there, and people have been aware of them, but it's only really now coming into consciousness. So we have the child abuse scandals in the UK. We have something like the BBC, which is classic Capricornian establishment, being complicit in that. We have the Me Too movement, all that sexual, because Pluto often also represents this kind of sexual power. It's the primal power of life force and transformation, and which obviously comes in a sexual way as well. So these hidden sexual kind of abuses have come out into the open, and what we're seeing now with the royal family being completely challenged, that's again another sign of this kind of plutonic transformation of the establishment. But where is it going to go? That's the question. And so we're going to begin this new cycle now with this Saturn Pluto, and the fact that Mercury is in line with both those planets at the beginning of this cycle suggests that there is also going to be transformation in the way Mercury represents how we communicate, how we talk, and how our mind works in a kind of very analytical and kind of way. So Mercury conjunct Pluto conjunct Saturn, what we've also had over the last who knows, 5 or 6, 7 years, is this idea of this kind of post-truth society that we live in through the internet, where basically anyone can put anything up and claim it to be true. Even this video could be like that. So this idea that anyone can kind of contribute to the kind of the ideas of how we think, and then this the way that they can be manipulated, the way that truth can be bent and or outright lies be spoken as if they are true. So Mercury represents, Mercury was a trickster planet, a trickster god. In a Greek myth, he's called Hermes. The first words he uttered, he was born precocious, so he was born almost as a little boy, and the first thing he did was steal some sheep off Apollo, and the first words he uttered were a lie, basically, to deny it. So Mercury doesn't always have a kind of good relationship with the truth in an objective way, hence it rules Gemini, and hence Gemini has that tendency sometimes in certain people to be less than straightforward with the truth, let's say. Now I suppose the higher meaning of that, or the higher truth of that, is is the paradoxical universe. So Mercury represents the trickster. So anything opposite what is expected or what is seen as right and moral can also give us great insight and great wisdom. And sometimes that's the only real way we can understand the universe, because through this paradoxical lens. So as part of that, the lie can be closer to the truth, and the truth can be closer to the lie. So how does that work? Well, if you think about creativity, or if you think about stories, if you think about how we have this ability as human beings, this incredible ability to make up something abstract and to feed something through our imagination. And sometimes through doing that, we can actually get closer to a universal truth. So let's look at classic examples of that. On one side you have Donald Trump, who's got Sun conjunct Uranus, which is also very trickstery. In Gemini, trickster sign that's not known for its absolute honesty. And then he blatant lies to get what he wants, basically, or to manipulate, and that's and people accept that because I think underneath it, or they understand this kind of this archetypal place that this trickster has in society, and that the more we try and build a strong civilization, the more we try and put down kind of really substantial buildings and everything in society, the stronger we make this kind of idea of permanence in our cultures, not talking about death, denying of death really, and just building these cities with all this condensed idea that this is going to last forever, the more we're going to invite that trickster in, because the trickster is about change. So in many ways I think we live in a trickster age, because we make society too rigid. There's too many rules, there's too many regulations, which is obviously part of human beings building up to the bigger the society, the more need for rules and people to enforce those rules. But the more we kind of buy into that, the more we invite this trickster, and obviously, and it comes often in the shadow. So someone like Trump is like the shadow trickster. He's the one that lies. The trickster's always hungry. The trickster is always trying to feed their own needs, usually physical, either sexual or in all the stories, or food. And it's part of the human being. It has our intelligence, our ability to mimic nature, our ability to say, look at where the bear hunts for salmon, and instead of instinctually being drawn to that, we follow what the bear does, and then we copy the bear, basically. So it's our ability to survive, to adapt as human beings. In the Western world, we think this is the highest part of being human, our cleverness, our technological abilities, and so this is all represented by this Mercury energy, this trickster energy. But when it goes into the shadow, it means that cleverness, that ability to take shortcuts, that ability to kind of mimic, becomes used just to fulfill one's own personal ego needs, if you like, desires, food, sex, and stuff like that, power. So mixed in with Pluto there, we have this kind of very clear idea of this trickster being empowered, which I believe we live in this trickster age. Everything is about opposites. Everything is about how much we can cheat, how much we can lie. The kind of old ideas of integrity, of the kind of more warrior ideas of your word is your life, basically. If you break your word, you lose your life. These have kind of gone into the background quite a lot, and also this mass-produced technology, this our ability, we're getting cleverer and cleverer, and at the same time further and further away from our roots and who we are because nature has that trickster element to it. If you look at evolutionary the mutation of the cells. That's how things evolve, and that's the trickster element. So a thing grows in a certain way, and then you have this mutation that changes it, that comes out of nowhere, and then it evolves into something else. So the trickster is sacred. Without the trickster, we don't evolve. But if there's too much of that trickster, if it's in this shadow, what happens is we're constantly trying to build this sense of security, these civilizations, these big walls around our cities, metaphorically speaking. And at the same time, from the inside, we're constantly disrupting it and changing it because we're addicted to that kind of our own cleverness. So we're trying to invent something new every single day. And so the big story of the trickster, if you like, is that the trickster creates constant problems through being greedy, lazy, and thinking they're cleverer than anyone else. But they have the ability, they create a problem, and then they have the cleverness to get out of that problem. So it's that cycle, constant cycle of, through stupidity, creating a problem and then trying to be clever enough to fix or find your way out of it. And in many ways, I think that's kind of the point we're at, really, as a culture and a society, because there's this awareness, this deep underlying awareness with Pluto in Capricorn of the changes we've initiated in the earth, and the disturbances we've made to nature, and how much that is potentially affecting the future of life, particularly human life on this planet. So we're becoming aware of this deep, and that's a very visceral thing. People are feeling it viscerally. It's not necessarily, there is an intellect involved, obviously, with the science and stuff like that, but it goes much deeper than that. You speak to the indigenous people, they are getting the same messages from the fire, from the elements, from the water. So there is this deep understanding that we have change things in a very precarious and dangerous way. And with this Pluto there in Capricorn, there's this deep instinctual knowing that unless we face up to this, and of course with anything Pluto, we want to bury it, we want to just stick it back down, and particularly with Saturn is the archetypal planet of repression. Saturn is like the opposite of any kind of emotional looking within or anything like that. Saturn is all about functionality and stoicism, really, and practical, and a practical approach to life. So we have this deep instinctual knowing that we are on this precipice, if you like, and Pluto's Saturn there is heightening that awareness, but it's felt as a kind of rumbling, a deep rumbling from within, a deep instinctual, and so a lot of people around this time might be feeling the fear of that. Whenever the Pluto Saturn get together, there's often a lot of fear in the psychic environment, hence this kind of edge of warfare, politics going into extremes, stuff like that. And then we've got Mercury added, so it's like this idea of this trickster idea. Can we think our way out of this? Can we develop the technologies that will actually enhance the planet and enhance more likely our relationship with it, and maybe stop this kind of this rushing off the cliff like a bunch of lemmings. So when I think of that, I think probably of like this, what's going on with the Democrats, particularly Bernie Sanders in the States, this idea of this Green New Deal that also Labour was pushing here. So this idea that we can take technology and we can and our cleverness and our inventiveness, and use it in a positive way, use it to transform the very structure of our societies. Because if with this Saturn conjunct Pluto, we're looking at another transformational cycle um, of our societies, how we relate to the world. If you think, Saturn is like the structure of society, like I said before, what we build, how we create. Now, all human beings have done that. We need to create something that is gonna hold the collective, if you like. It's so you get from very very primal tribal societies that have this kind of very loose structure, very egalitarian, and it's not such a held or strong, and there's not so many rules, and although there will be certain rules, but it's because there's less people, and it's done much more through a human interaction, deciding with council, stuff like that. So you have this as a kind of a model, if you like, of how humans survived for hundreds of thousands of years and kept in pretty good relationship with nature. It wasn't perfect, of course, but and then you have the other extreme, which is what we have, is this kind of globalized society where everything is trying to replicate itself. So everything is about being a Saturnian control, holding things together. So you have this need, this Saturnian need for structure. With it, in an individual, Saturn and Capricorn represent the skeleton in the human body. So it's what holds us together. It's the basis, and then you have Pluto, which is it's the primal need of nature. It's also seen as the evolutionary planet. So it's that power that is at the heart of all of life, that power to move forward with extreme power, and then to transform constantly in order to survive. So the birth, life, death cycle. So what we have at the moment is the way we organize society, the way we structure it and build it up, is very odds and with anything natural, really, with this natural, and to the point where we've got this like addiction to kind of constant growth, constant expansion, life, and we've forgot to honor the phases of life, the birth, life, death, cycle, and that is constantly. So we don't honor that in the seasons anymore. We don't honor that in ourselves, really, and these transformational moments in life. So we're very much at odds with the kind of natural environment, if you like, and particularly this Plutonic. So therefore, the Plutonic power comes out in a very dark, kind of shadowy way. It's all about having power over this idea that if human beings can control nature and control ourselves, control our society, control others, go to war and take over another kind of continent, if we can somehow get this whole complex, magnificent being that is nature and the Mother Earth, if we can somehow bend it to our will as human beings, then we will, I don't know, live forever, be happy. I don't know, whatever there's kind of the madness that is driving this kind of obsession with power over, which is the darker side of Pluto. We've come to this point where it's more and more, and that's why we're obsessed with the entertainment, the box sets and that we watch. It's all about power games and this kind of medieval idea of someone has power and then someone comes along and kills them and they are the king and blah blah blah. It is all kind of this. I believe because we've lost touch with this deeper connection with this plutonic energy within ourselves, which is very natural. We don't need to control it. We can't control it. That's the thing. And anyone with Saturn and Pluto in difficult aspect with their lives learns this hard lesson over and over again, that there is a force to life, there is a fatefulness in life that you cannot control. No matter how wise you become, or what a great spiritual leader you become, or healer, or whatever, you just there's a force to life that is so beyond our control, which is Saturn trying to control the Pluto, that all we can do is surrender and allow that process to, because we don't know what is the other side. That's the point. It's the mystery. We don't know where this transformation is going, and that's also the point. Any deep transformation in ourselves personally or as a collective involves a surrender to something much bigger than ourselves. These primal forces that make up the world and the universe, the elemental forces, which we're seeing so much with the floods in the UK and the fires in Australia. These are the elements going, we're the ones really in control. You can build your civilizations, you can create your illusions of power, your illusions of longevity, but actually these elements, we're the ones that, if you forget us, if you forget to honor us, if you forget to pray to us and align yourselves with us, then we'll take back power. Which I believe is if you look from an astrological perspective, is Pluto working its way through Capricorn. So there's this deep underlying transformation of the Earth, but more importantly our relationship to the Earth. So getting back to the Saturn conjunct Pluto conjunct Mercury, how can we use our cleverness, our intelligence, the gift that the Creator gave us, the ability to mimic, the ability to think abstractly, the ability to imagine. How can we use this to transform our relationship with these deeper, more primal forces, elemental forces in life that are constantly transforming and constantly keeping us in that, trying to keep us in that cycle, and B, how do we then change our societies to reflect that, as our social structures, our political structures? And this is the challenge, if you like. This is the challenge of this next cycle, which, like I say, so 82, what's that, around 40 years ago. So another cycle, and if you look at the environmental issues at the moment, this is the critical time. This is the time when we really do have to change the way we think, change the way we dream. What is the dream we want to bring in as a collective? Do we want to bring more control, destructive relating to the Earth, to our communities within ourselves, or do we want to seed a new dream, seed a dream where by our vision, our ability to think, our ability to detach, our ability to dream is done in such a way that it enhances our relationship with the Earth, with ourselves, and with each other. So I think this is a long way round of saying it's time to change things, it's time to transform. And because the positive side of it, the Saturn Pluto, there's a lot of power available at the moment. So if we can start to plant those seeds, but also look at these. If you think about that last Saturn Pluto, not the last one, the one before. So in the 1947, late 40s, like I say, the UK transformed its whole society in terms of the NHS, the welfare state. It was a huge, monumental effort. But it was possible because of the energy at the time, the power that Pluto brings in order, in a positive way, to reform society, to reform ourselves and how we structurally relate to ourselves. So there is, if you do have a vision, if you do have a kind of an understanding or a dream or something that we can get back into connection with ourselves, with the elements, with the land, then now's the time for these things to be built, and now's the time really for us to to get our head down and work hard in a true Saturnian way, and really look forward to what we want to build, what we want to transform. And to remember at the same time, we're not in control. So as much surrendering and listening and opening and to get ourselves in alignment. And then through that, potentially incredible changes could happen. Okay, I think that's it. That's only one aspect of this Saturn Pluto. A load of other astrologers will talk about completely different stuff, and that's the beauty of astrology. Everyone has their own little insight, take on it. I've just been kind of rapping, if you like, just looking at the chart and seeing what's happening. As you might have noticed, I didn't really prepare for this. I just thought, let's read it, see what comes out in a moment. Like I say, other astrologers will see something completely different, and that's all good, because as long as we've all got a little piece of the puzzle, if you like. So we're here to share that little piece and see if it resonates or if it lands in any good way. And that's the beauty of astrology. It's that you can look at a chart 100 times and you can still see something else. It has this profound kind of, it's measurement and story. It's like an invitation to explore the narrative of the time, and that's such a beautiful thing, I think, and it keeps me interested. So yeah, thank you for listening if you got this far, and have a good Saturn Pluto conjunction, Mercury Sun conjunction tomorrow on Sunday. Thank you. Bye.